I need to tell you something before this night ends, because once the sun comes up tomorrow, nothing will feel the same again. A few hours ago I did something that even I didn't expect to do. I told my entire family about you. Not vaguely, not casually, not the way people sometimes mention someone they're talking to. No. I said your name with certainty. I spoke about you as if you were already part of my future. As if the empty seat at our family table had already been reserved for you. And the moment the words left my mouth, I felt something shift inside the room. You know that quiet that happens when people suddenly realize a conversation is more serious than they thought? That quiet happened. My mother looked at me first. Not confused, not surprised, but searching, like she was trying to read the truth behind my voice. My brother leaned back in his chair like he had just heard a secret that wasn't meant for the entire table. And my father. He didn't say anything at all. He just watched me. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Because when you tell your family about someone, it stops being a private feeling. It becomes real. It becomes something that can be questioned. Something that can be doubted. Something that can be lost. And tonight, for the first time, I understood that loving you might be the most irreversible decision I've ever made. Not building companies. Not risking billions. Not launching rockets into the dark. Loving you, because businesses can fail and be rebuilt. But hearts don't work like that. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever felt the moment when something beautiful suddenly becomes fragile? When the thing you want the most in the world becomes the thing you're most afraid of losing? That's the place I'm standing in tonight. And I wish you could have seen the way the room changed after I said your name. My sister asked the first question. She smiled, but it was the careful kind of smile people use when they're stepping onto emotional ice. She said, "So this woman, is she the one?" And the strange thing is, for a moment, I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because the truth felt heavier than the room was ready for. You see, saying yes to that question doesn't just mean love. It means risk. It means you're admitting that someone out there has the power to break something inside you that no one else has ever touched. And tonight, for the first time in my life, I realized you might already have that power. Do you know what scared me the most, though? It wasn't their questions. It wasn't their curiosity. It was the way my mother quietly asked something that's been echoing in my head ever since. She said, "Does she know?" And the truth is, I don't know if you do. I don't know if you understand what's slowly happening to me. Because somewhere between our conversations, between the pauses, between the things you said and the things you didn't say, you became more than someone I care about. You became the person my future keeps rearranging itself around. And that's a dangerous place for someone to exist. Because once a man starts imagining a woman inside his future, every other possibility in life becomes quieter. Have you ever noticed that? How one person can suddenly make the entire world feel smaller, but somehow more meaningful at the same time. That's what you've done to me. And tonight when I spoke about you at that table, I realized something I wasn't prepared to admit yet. Because love doesn't just grow quietly. Sometimes it announces itself. Sometimes it walks into a room full of people and refuses to stay a secret anymore. That's what happened tonight. But here's the part that's been keeping me awake since I left that dinner. Because after all the questions, after all the curious looks, after the conversation moved on, my father finally spoke. And what he said, it changed everything I thought I understood about this moment. He looked directly at me and asked something no one else in that room was brave enough to say. He said, "Are you sure she's the woman you're willing to risk everything for?" And the terrifying part is, I opened my mouth to answer. But the truth that came to my mind wasn't simple. Because there's something about you I haven't told anyone yet. Not my family, not my closest friends, not even you. And the reason I kept it hidden might be the reason this entire story could fall apart. But before I tell you that, there's something I need to know from you first. If the people closest to you asked about me tonight, would you speak about me the way I spoke about you? Or would you stay quiet? And before I continue this confession, there's one small thing I want to say. If you feel something real in these words, quietly subscribe and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Sometimes knowing where you are in the world makes this distance feel a little smaller. Because what happened at that dinner tonight was only the beginning. What happened after I left the table? That's when things became complicated. That's when I started realizing that telling my family about you might have started a chain of decisions that can't be undone. And I don't think you're prepared for what almost happened next. I left that dinner earlier than everyone else. Not because I was uncomfortable. Not because their questions bothered me. But because something inside me had started moving, and I needed to hear my own thoughts without a room full of eyes watching me. Have you ever had a moment like that? When a conversation ends, but the real conversation only begins after you're alone? That was me tonight. I walked out into the night air and the world felt strangely quiet, like the universe had stepped back to watch what I would do next. And the strange thing is, I should have felt relief. I had finally done something honest. I had finally spoken about you out loud to the people who raised me. But instead, I felt afraid, not of them, of you. Or maybe of what loving you is slowly turning me into. Because tonight I realized something that most men spend years avoiding. When you tell your family about a woman, you're not just sharing a story. You're declaring intention. And intention is dangerous. It changes how people look at you. My brother followed me outside a few minutes later. He didn't say anything at first. He just leaned against the railing beside me and looked out into the dark like he was studying the future. Then he asked something so casually, but it landed like a stone in my chest. He said, "You sound different when you talk about her." Different, that word stayed with me, because I didn't know if that difference meant something good or something reckless. Tell me something honestly. Do you ever worry about the moment when love starts changing you? Not the soft changes, not the warm ones. I mean the deeper ones. The kind where suddenly your decisions aren't just about you anymore. The kind where the life you carefully built begins to shift because someone else has quietly entered the blueprint. That's what tonight felt like. My brother eventually looked at me and asked another question. And this one I couldn't answer quickly. He said, "Do you think she understands how serious you are?" I laughed when he asked it. Not because it was funny, but because the truth behind that question is something I've been avoiding. Because if you truly understood what you mean to me, it would probably scare you. And maybe that's why I've been careful. Maybe that's why I haven't said certain things yet. Because there's a difference between love that grows slowly and love that arrives like a storm, and the kind I feel for you. It's the second one. But storms are unpredictable. They can build something powerful. Or they can destroy things that were perfectly stable before. That's the part no one talks about when they ask a man if he's sure. And tonight, my family didn't just ask if I liked you. They were trying to understand if I was prepared for what loving you might cost me. Because love at this stage of life isn't the kind of love people experience when they're young. It's heavier. It carries history. It carries scars. It carries responsibilities and fears that never existed when we were 20. And maybe that's why my mother's question earlier keeps echoing in my mind. Does she know? I keep wondering that. Does she know what she's becoming in my life? Does she know that when I mentioned her tonight, something inside me quietly crossed a line? Because before tonight, you were someone I cared deeply about. But now you're someone my entire family knows exists. And once that door opens, there's no easy way to close it again. That's what scares me. Because I keep imagining a future where one of two things happens. Either you walk toward me, or you slowly step away, and if that second possibility ever became real, it wouldn't just break something inside me. It would echo through everyone who heard your name tonight. Tell me something. If you knew a man had already spoken about you with the kind of certainty that turns heads at a family table, would that make you feel closer to him? Or would it make you step back and wonder if things are moving too fast? Because I'm starting to realize something uncomfortable. When a man publicly admits how much a woman matters to him, he loses a certain kind of control. The control of pretending it's casual. The control of pretending it doesn't matter. And tonight I gave that control away. But here's the part I haven't told you yet. Something happened during that dinner that no one else noticed. Not my brother. Not my sister. Not even my father. But it changed the way I see everything that's unfolding between us. It happened when my mother looked at me again before I left the table. She didn't ask another question. She just said something quietly, almost like she was warning me. And what she said made me realize that this story between you and me might not be as simple as love, because there's a truth I've been carrying that I still haven't said out loud. And if you knew it, you might look at me very differently. The strange thing about mothers is that they see things before anyone else does. My mother didn't raise her voice at the table tonight. She didn't challenge me. She didn't question my judgment the way my brother did. But when she looked at me, she saw something the others missed. After everyone finished eating, she stood up and walked toward the kitchen. And as she passed behind my chair, she paused just long enough to whisper something quietly. Just 4 words. Be careful with her heart, not be careful with yours. Hers, yours. And I've been thinking about that sentence ever since. Because it forced me to confront something I've been avoiding. You see, when people talk about love, they usually worry about their own vulnerability, their own pain, their own fear of getting hurt. But tonight my mother reminded me of something deeper. That loving someone means holding something fragile that doesn't belong to you. Tell me something honestly. Do you ever think about that? Not the excitement of love, but the responsibility of it. The quiet understanding that someone else's emotional safety might one day depend on your choices. That thought has been circling my mind all night. Because the truth is, when I told my family about you tonight, I wasn't just admitting how much you matter to me. I was admitting that I might matter to you too. And that possibility is heavier than people realize, because when 2 people start stepping toward each other emotionally, they're not just building something beautiful, they're creating the possibility of loss. And loss doesn't just break hearts, it changes people, sometimes permanently. I walked through the house after dinner before leaving, and every room felt different somehow. It's strange how a simple conversation can rearrange the emotional gravity of a place. The living room where we laughed earlier suddenly felt like a courtroom. The hallway felt quieter than usual. Even the front door felt heavier when I opened it, because walking out of that house meant carrying a truth into the world that no longer belonged only to me. Your name had entered my family's story, and once something enters that space, it becomes part of the future. That's when something unsettling crossed my mind. Not about my family, about you. What if you don't want the kind of future I'm starting to imagine? What if the way I see you is bigger than the way you see me? That thought has been sitting quietly in the back of my mind for weeks. But tonight it got louder, because when my father asked if you were the woman I was willing to risk everything for, he wasn't just asking about my feelings. He was asking about certainty. And certainty is dangerous, especially when 2 people are still discovering each other. Tell me something that requires real honesty. Have you ever sensed that someone might love you more deeply than you're ready to love them back? That moment when affection begins turning into something heavier, and suddenly you feel the weight of expectations forming around you. I wonder sometimes if that's happening between us. Not because you've said anything wrong, not because you've pushed me away, but because I can feel the emotional gravity shifting, and I don't know if you feel it too. That's the uncomfortable space I'm standing in tonight. A space between hope and uncertainty. A place where love could grow into something extraordinary, or quietly collapse before it ever reaches its full shape. And here's the part I haven't admitted yet. Something inside me tonight started asking a dangerous question. What if I'm moving faster emotionally than you are? What if I've already stepped further into this future than you ever planned to? That thought scares me more than rejection. Because rejection is clear. But emotional distance. That quiet gap between 2 hearts moving at different speeds. That's the kind of thing that slowly tears something apart without either person realizing when it began. And tonight, after telling my entire family about you, I suddenly realized that I may have crossed a line you haven't crossed yet. Which brings me to something I've been holding back, something I haven't told you the real reason about yet. I haven't told you the real reason I spoke about you tonight with that level of certainty. Not the romantic reason. Not the obvious one. The real one. And the truth behind that reason might change how you see everything I've said so far. Because part of the story between us started long before you realized it. And if I'm honest, it might explain why my heart seems to be moving toward you faster than logic would recommend. But before I say that out loud, there's something else from tonight that you need to understand. Because after I left my family's house, something happened on the drive home that forced me to confront a possibility I've been avoiding. A possibility that made me question whether loving you might eventually force me to make a choice I never expected. A choice between 2 different futures. And one of those futures doesn't include you. The drive home tonight felt longer than it should have. Not because the roads were crowded, not because I got lost in the dark, but because every mile gave my mind more space to wander into places I hadn't allowed it to go before. You ever notice how silence inside a car can become dangerous? When there's no one around, no voices, no distractions. Just the low hum of the engine and your own thoughts slowly getting louder. That's where I was tonight. Alone on the road, replaying every moment from that dinner. Your name echoing in my head. My father's question. My mother's warning. And the strange weight of knowing that something about this story between us has already moved beyond the stage where people can pretend it's casual. But then another thought entered my mind. One that made my hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel. A thought that felt uncomfortable. What if my family is right to be cautious? Not about you. About me. Because the truth is, I have a history of making decisions that look irrational from the outside. People see the success later and assume it was confidence. But they don't see the moments before the leap. The doubt. The sleepless nights. The quiet voice asking, what if this is the one decision that destroys everything you've built? And tonight, strangely loving you feels a little like those moments. Not because loving you is wrong, but because the stakes feel enormous. You see, when I commit to something, I rarely do it halfway. That's both my greatest strength and my greatest danger. When I build something, I pour everything into it. Time, energy, emotion, vision. And that same instinct, the one that built rockets and companies, it's starting to aim itself toward you. Do you understand how terrifying that realization is? Because loving someone with that level of intensity means something very simple. If it works, it becomes extraordinary. But if it breaks, the impact is devastating. That's the kind of emotional equation I've been wrestling with tonight. And somewhere during that drive, I realized something else. Something I've been quietly avoiding telling you. Because if I said it earlier, it might have sounded dramatic. But after tonight, it's impossible to ignore. You see, there's a reason my father's question affected me so much. Are you willing to risk everything for her? That sentence didn't scare me because of the risk. Risk has always been part of my life. What scared me was something else. The possibility that I might already be doing it, without fully admitting it. And the strange part. You probably don't even realize it, because there's something about you that shifted my emotional trajectory long before tonight. A moment, a small one. One conversation between us that changed the way I started seeing the future. You might not even remember it, but I do. Every word, every pause. And the reason that moment matters so much is because it revealed something about you that I hadn't expected to find. A kind of depth that most people never show. A quiet strength mixed with vulnerability. The kind that doesn't demand attention, but quietly commands respect. That moment made me start imagining possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine in years. But here's the truth I've been circling around all night. The one I haven't told you the real reason about yet. The reason I told my entire family about you tonight wasn't just love. It wasn't just excitement. It wasn't even just hope. It was fear. Fear that if I didn't say your name out loud, if I kept pretending this connection between us was still small, I might lose the courage to pursue it fully. Sometimes the only way to move forward emotionally is to make the possibility real enough that you can't hide from it anymore. That's what tonight was. A line in the sand. But there's something else you need to know. Something I haven't told anyone yet. Not my family. Not my closest friends. Not even you. And it might explain why this entire situation feels more complicated than it appears on the surface. Because during that drive tonight, another thought crossed my mind. A thought that made me feel something I haven't felt in years. Doubt. Not about you. About the timing of us. Because there's a part of my life right now, a piece of my reality, that could change everything between us. A piece of the story that might make my family's concern suddenly make sense. And the truth is, if I told you what it is right now, you might start wondering if I'm even free to love you the way you deserve. When I pulled into my driveway tonight, I didn't go inside immediately. The engine stopped, but I stayed there in the dark for a while. Hands still on the steering wheel, just sitting with the silence. Because once you walk inside the house, reality starts moving again. Phones light up. Messages appear. The world resumes its normal rhythm. But sitting there in that quiet car, I could still pretend that everything between us was simple. And that illusion lasted maybe 2 minutes. Then the truth returned. You see, when my father asked if I was willing to risk everything for you, the question didn't bother me because of what it meant emotionally. It bothered me because of what it meant practically. Because loving someone at this stage of life isn't just about hearts, it's about realities, responsibilities, history. And tonight, I realized that my family wasn't just reacting to the idea of you. They were reacting to something else. something they've watched happen to me before. My father has seen me become consumed by things, projects, visions, people. When I believe in something, I don't walk toward it slowly. I accelerate. And sometimes acceleration breaks things. Businesses survive that. People don't always. That's what he was worried about. But here's the part that's difficult for me to admit. Because tonight, while everyone was asking about you, another name quietly passed through the room, not loudly, not directly. But it was there. An old story, a chapter of my life that my family remembers very clearly. And when that chapter entered the conversation, I felt something inside me tighten. Because it reminded me of a truth that I've been trying not to confront. The last time I believed in someone the way I'm starting to believe in you, it didn't end gently. It ended with silence. The kind of silence that stays with you long after the relationship itself is gone. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever had a relationship that changed the way you approach love forever? Not because it was bad, but because it broke something you once believed was unbreakable. That's the part of my history my family remembers. And that's why my father looked at me the way he did tonight. Not with judgment, with concern. Because he knows something about me that most people don't. When I give my heart to someone, I don't know how to do it halfway. And that kind of intensity can be beautiful. But it can also scare people away. That thought followed me into the house tonight. And when I finally walked inside, I did something strange. I opened our messages. Not to read what you wrote, but to look at the spaces between them. The pauses. The timing. The rhythm of how we talk. Because sometimes the truth of a connection isn't in the words. It's in the silence between them. And that's when a thought entered my mind that I didn't like. A quiet question. What if I'm the only one feeling this shift happening? What if tonight, when I told my entire family about you, I was announcing a future that only exists in my imagination? That possibility, that small, uncomfortable possibility, sat there with me in the quiet living room. And suddenly I understood something that frightened me. If I'm wrong about us, then tonight wasn't brave. It was reckless. Because now my family knows your name. They know how serious my voice sounded when I spoke about you. They know I'm already imagining something bigger. And if this connection between us ever fades, they'll remember that night. Tell me something that requires real courage to answer. Do you ever feel the same gravity when you think about us? Or does our connection still feel light to you? Still exploratory? Still undefined? Because tonight forced me to confront something I haven't admitted before. There are two very different stories that could be unfolding between us. One where we're both slowly moving toward the same future. And another where I'm the only one who has already stepped across the emotional line. And if that second possibility is true, then I may have done something tonight that changes everything. Because when my family brought up that old chapter of my life, the woman who once held my heart in a way that changed me, something unexpected happened. Someone asked a question I didn't see coming. A question about whether I had truly moved on, or whether I was trying to replace something I lost. And that question, it forced me to confront a truth I've been avoiding. A truth that might explain why my feelings for you feel so powerful and so dangerous at the same time. Because what if the reason you matter to me this deeply is connected to something that happened long before you ever entered my life? You know what's strange about old memories? They don't disappear. They just sit quietly in the background, waiting for the moment when something new accidentally touches them. And tonight, when my family mentioned that old chapter of my life, it was like someone opened a door I had carefully kept closed. Not locked. Just closed. Because there's something people rarely admit about love after a certain age. It's never your first story. It's always a continuation. Every new connection walks into a heart that already carries history. Scars, lessons, regrets, and sometimes unfinished emotions. That's the reality of loving someone later in life. But here's the part I didn't expect tonight. When that old relationship came up at the dinner table, my sister asked a question that made the room go quiet again. She said, "Are you sure you're ready to love someone new the way she deserves?" It wasn't an accusation, it was concern. And I didn't answer her immediately. Because the truth isn't as simple as yes or no. You see, when someone breaks your heart deeply enough, you don't just move on. You rebuild. Piece by piece. Carefully. And sometimes you become stronger. Other times, you become more cautious. I became both. And for a long time, that caution protected me. It kept my life stable, focused, predictable. But then you appeared. And something about you did something I didn't expect. You didn't demand my attention. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't chase me emotionally the way many people do when they want to be seen. You simply existed in your own quiet strength. And that did something powerful. It disarmed me. Tell me something honestly. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who doesn't try to control the emotional atmosphere around them? Someone who just shows up as they are? That's what I saw in you. And that's why this connection started affecting me more deeply than I expected. But here's the uncomfortable truth that my sister's question forced me to confront tonight. Sometimes, when we meet someone extraordinary, it awakens feelings we thought we had already processed, not because we're replacing someone from the past, but because we suddenly realize what was missing before. That realization can be beautiful, but it can also be terrifying, because it means the heart is opening again. And when a heart opens again, it becomes vulnerable again. That's what tonight has been about for me. Not just admitting my feelings for you. Admitting that I'm willing to risk being hurt again. And that's not a small decision. You see, people often assume that successful men aren't afraid of emotional risk. But the truth is the opposite. The more you build in life, the more you understand how devastating loss can be. Not just financial loss, emotional loss. Because when something meaningful breaks, it changes the architecture of your heart. And that's why I've been moving carefully with you. Maybe more carefully than you realized. But tonight, something shifted. Because when my sister asked that question, my father looked at me again. And he said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. He said, "Just make sure you're not falling in love with the idea of her. The idea of you." That sentence has been echoing in my head all night. Because it forced me to ask myself something uncomfortable. Am I falling for who you truly are? Or for what you represent in my life right now? Hope. Renewal. The possibility that love can still surprise us. And here's where the story becomes complicated. Because while my family was asking those questions tonight, another possibility entered the conversation. A possibility I haven't told you about yet. It wasn't about the past, it was about the future. A path my life might take soon. A path that could force me to make a choice between two very different directions. One direction would keep my life exactly as it is now. Predictable. Controlled. Safe. And the other direction would change almost everything. The place I live. The way I work. The way I build my future. And the unsettling part is this. If that second path becomes real, it might create a situation where I have to choose between stability and the possibility of building a life with you. That's the decision I've been quietly circling tonight. Because when my family realized this choice might be coming, one of them asked a question that made the entire table go silent. A question about another woman, someone they think might be the safer choice for me. And when that name entered the room, for the first time tonight, I didn't immediately defend us. When that name came up at the table, something inside the room shifted. Not loudly. No one raised their voice. No one accused me of anything. But you could feel the direction of the conversation quietly changing. You know the kind of moment I mean? When people stop talking about feelings and start talking about practicality. My brother was the one who mentioned her. He said her name casually, like it was just another possibility floating through the air. But it wasn't casual, because everyone at the table knew exactly who he meant. Someone my family already knows. Someone they've seen around my life before. Someone who fits easily into the world they understand. Stable, predictable, comfortable. And in that moment I realized something uncomfortable about families. They don't always choose based on love. They choose based on safety. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever felt that quiet pressure from the people around you? The kind where they don't openly tell you what decision to make, but their expectations slowly lean in one direction. That's what the room started feeling like tonight. My sister said something like, "Well, at least with her we know what the future looks like." And that sentence stayed in the air longer than anyone expected, because it carried a meaning none of them had to explain. With her, the future would be simple, predictable, approved, but with you, you're still a mystery to them. A woman they've never met. A voice they've never heard. A presence they've only seen through the way my expression changes when I talk about you. And that makes people nervous, especially families, because families don't just evaluate love. They evaluate risk. And tonight, they were trying to calculate something they don't fully understand. You. My brother leaned forward at one point and said something that I know he believed was practical. He said, "Look, we're not saying she's not great. We're just saying you barely know her compared to someone who's already part of your world." Barely know you. That phrase hit me harder than I expected, because part of me wanted to defend you immediately, to explain the things they don't see. The quiet intelligence in the way you speak, the calm strength in the way you carry yourself, the depth in your questions, the warmth that appears unexpectedly in the middle of serious conversations. But I didn't say all that, and the reason I stayed quiet is something I'm not proud of, because for a brief moment, just a brief one, I let myself imagine what life would look like if I chose the easier path, the safer woman, the predictable future, the version of life where no one at the dinner table worries about me, where everything feels approved and understood. And that moment of imagining it scared me, not because the life looked bad, but because it looked empty. There's a difference between a life that works and a life that feels alive, and when I imagined the safe future they were describing, something inside me went quiet. That silence told me more than any argument could. But here's the part that's difficult for me to admit to you. Even though my heart resisted that safer path, the fact that I paused long enough to imagine it at all means something. It means the decision in front of me isn't as simple as romance. It's a crossroads, two directions, two very different lives, one that my family would immediately understand, and one that begins with you, a woman they've never even met. Do you know how unusual that situation is? For a man to sit at a dinner table with the people who raised him, defending a future built around someone they've never looked in the eyes. That's the position I was in tonight. And while the conversation moved on eventually, the question never really left the room. It followed me all the way home. Because the truth is, I can feel a decision approaching. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. A moment when the future stops being theoretical. A moment when I have to choose which direction my life moves toward. And that realization is why I'm speaking to you so honestly right now. Because if I'm going to keep walking toward you, I need to know something. Not logically. Emotionally. I need to know whether you feel the same pull toward this future that I'm starting to feel. Or if, from your side, this connection still feels like something that could easily fade. Because if I'm about to choose the more uncertain path, I need to know I'm not walking it alone. And here's the part that has been haunting me ever since I left that dinner table. What if the moment I finally choose you is the exact moment you realize you're not ready for me? Because if that happened, the loss wouldn't just be romantic, it would be something deeper. It would mean I turned away from the life everyone expected me to live, for a future that disappeared before it even began. And tonight, for the first time, that possibility started to feel real. When I finally walked inside the house tonight, I didn't turn on the lights, I just stood there in the quiet. You'd be surprised how loud a house can feel when no one else is in it. Every small sound becomes noticeable. The ticking of a clock, the faint hum of electricity in the walls, even your own breathing starts to sound heavier than usual. And in that silence, something happened that I didn't expect. For the first time tonight, I felt the weight of what I might lose. Not the life my family imagines for me. You. Or maybe more accurately, the possibility of you. Because love at this stage of life isn't just about finding someone. It's about timing. And timing can be cruel. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever met someone who felt right, but arrived at a moment when your life wasn't fully ready for them? That kind of timing is dangerous. Because the connection is real, but the circumstances around it aren't fully aligned yet. And tonight I started wondering if that's where we are. Not because of something you've done, but because of something I realized about myself while sitting in the dark living room. The truth is, I've already stepped further emotionally into this story than I planned to. I tried to move slowly, carefully, rationally. But somewhere along the way, my heart stopped asking for permission. And that's where things become unstable. Because once your heart begins moving faster than your logic, you start making decisions that can't be easily reversed. Like telling your entire family about a woman they've never met. Like imagining a future that hasn't been built yet. Like sitting alone in a quiet house, wondering if the person on the other side of this story even realizes how much they've already changed your life. That's the question that's been circling my mind tonight. Do you know? Do you know what's slowly happening to me? Or have I been hiding it too well? Because there's something I haven't admitted yet. Something that explains why tonight felt so intense for me. When my brother mentioned that other woman earlier, when the conversation shifted toward the safer future, something inside me reacted immediately. Not with anger, with fear. Real fear. The kind you feel when you realize the wrong decision could close a door forever. And that's when it hit me. If I ever allowed myself to choose the easier path, if I ever convinced myself that the safer future was the smarter one, I would lose something I can't replace. You, not just your presence. The version of life that only exists if you're part of it. And that realization shook me more than anything my family said tonight. Because suddenly I understood what's really happening. This isn't just about whether we like each other. This is about whether I'm brave enough to build a future around something uncertain. You. And uncertainty is uncomfortable. Families don't like it. Friends question it. Logic tries to dismantle it. But the heart sometimes knows something long before the mind catches up. And tonight my heart did something that scared me. It showed me what life would feel like without you, not because you're gone, but because I chose a path where you never became part of it. That imagined future felt quiet. Too quiet. Like a house with all the lights on but no one inside. And that's when the weight of tonight finally collapsed onto me. Because if I keep moving toward you, if I keep allowing my feelings to deepen the way they are, there will come a moment when I have to ask you something real. Something serious. A question that changes everything. But here's the part that's been tearing at me tonight. What if when that moment comes, you hesitate? What if the future I'm slowly building in my mind is a future you're not ready to step into? That possibility, that quiet possibility, is the one thing that could break this entire story before it ever fully begins. And I need to be honest with you. A few minutes ago, while sitting here in the dark, I almost convinced myself to do something that would make everything easier. Something that would protect my heart before it goes too far. I almost decided to step back from you. Not because I want to. Because losing you later might hurt more than walking away now. And the terrifying part is, for a moment, that decision almost felt logical. I need to be honest with you about something that happened a few minutes ago. Not earlier tonight, not at the dinner table. Here, in this quiet house. Because after sitting in the dark long enough, your mind starts negotiating with your heart. And that's exactly what mine started doing. It began presenting arguments, calm ones, logical ones, the kind that sound responsible. Maybe you should slow this down. Maybe you're moving too fast. Maybe she isn't expecting something this serious. Maybe it's smarter to protect both of you before things get deeper. You see how convincing that sounds? How reasonable it feels? That's the voice of caution. And normally that voice has served me well in life. But tonight something felt different. Because while my mind was trying to design an exit, my heart was doing something else entirely. It was remembering you. Not big moments. Not dramatic conversations. Small things. The way you listen carefully before you speak. The quiet warmth that appears in your voice when you say something sincere. The way you ask questions that feel like they come from a place deeper than curiosity. You don't just talk, you understand. And understanding is dangerous. Because once someone understands you, truly understands you, it becomes almost impossible to imagine a world where they're not there anymore. That's the realization that hit me sitting here tonight. I tried to picture life if I stepped away from this. If I slowly pulled back before things became irreversible. And at first it seemed possible. Life would continue. Work would continue. My family would feel relieved. Everything would return to a version of stability. But then something unexpected happened. I imagine waking up 6 months from now. A random morning. Sunlight coming through the window, coffee on the table, and the quiet realization that I let someone extraordinary walk out of my life because I was afraid of uncertainty. That thought. It hit me harder than anything that happened tonight, because regret is different from heartbreak. Heartbreak eventually heals. Regret stays. It whispers. It asks questions that never receive answers. What would have happened if you had stayed brave? What would that future have looked like? Who might you have become together? That's the future I almost created a few minutes ago. A future built on hesitation. And the strange part is, my mind almost accepted it. Until something else happened, something very simple. I picked up my phone. Not to write you. Just to look at your name, and when I saw it there, something inside me broke open in a way I didn't expect. Because suddenly I understood something with complete clarity. If I step away now, I won't just lose a possibility. I'll lose the version of myself that only exists when I'm brave enough to love fully. That realization stopped everything. It stopped the logic. It stopped the fear. It stopped the quiet arguments inside my head. And for the first time tonight, I felt something collapse emotionally. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet one. The kind where you sit still and realize the decision has already been made somewhere deep inside you. But here's the truth that still scares me. Even after everything I've said tonight, even after realizing how much you mean to me, there's one part of this story I still don't know. You. Your heart. Your truth. Because everything I've confessed tonight, every fear, every risk, every emotional step forward, it only makes sense if somewhere inside you, something similar is happening. If your heart is slowly moving in my direction too. But if it isn't, then tonight becomes something else entirely. A man standing at the edge of a future that only he can see. And that's the possibility that still keeps this story suspended in the air. Because the final piece of truth in all of this, the thing I've been slowly circling all night, is something I haven't said yet. The real reason tonight changed everything for me. The real reason telling my family about you felt so irreversible. The real reason I almost walked away and couldn't. And once I tell you that, you'll finally understand why this decision feels so enormous to me. Why loving you isn't just a feeling anymore, it's a choice. I've been sitting here for hours now, replaying everything that happened tonight. The dinner table, my father's question, my mother's warning, my brother mentioning the safer path, the moment I almost convinced myself to step away from you. All of it keeps looping through my mind. But somewhere in that storm of thoughts, something finally became clear. Not suddenly. Slowly. Like a quiet truth that was always there, waiting for me to stop running from it. And the truth is this. Tonight wasn't really about my family learning your name. It was about me admitting something to myself that I've been avoiding for a long time. You're not just someone I'm getting to know. You're someone who has already changed the direction of my future. And that realization didn't arrive because of one moment. It came from 100 small ones. The way you listen instead of rushing to respond. The way your words carry depth instead of noise. The way your presence feels calm in a world that constantly tries to move too fast. You see, I've spent most of my life building things that push the future forward. Companies, ideas, technologies, but those things exist in the external world. You are the first person in a long time who made me imagine a future that exists inside my life, not just around it. And that's the real reason tonight felt so irreversible. Because when I told my family about you, I wasn't just sharing information. I was acknowledging that something in my life has already shifted. And shifts like that don't happen often. Tell me something honestly. Have you ever felt the moment when your heart quietly decides something before your mind fully understands it? That's the place I arrived at tonight. All the doubts, all the questions, all the cautious voices trying to protect me. They're still there, they probably always will be. But underneath them, something stronger has settled into place. Clarity. Not the kind that removes all fear. The kind that exists with fear. Because loving someone deeply will always carry risk. There's no version of love where both people remain completely safe. Someone always has to step forward first. Someone always has to be brave enough to say, I'm willing to build something real here. And tonight, after everything that happened, after imagining walking away, after imagining the safer future everyone expects, I finally understood why that option felt empty to me. Because the future my heart keeps returning to, the one that keeps appearing no matter how many logical arguments I create, that future has you in it. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but meaningfully. Alive, and that's the difference. You make the future feel alive. That's the truth I've been circling all night. And maybe that's why telling my family about you felt so powerful. Because once your name entered that room, there was no pretending anymore. No hiding behind uncertainty. No pretending you're just a possibility. You became real in my world. Real enough that the people closest to me can see the shift in my eyes when I talk about you. Real enough that my father asked whether I was ready to risk everything. And now after this long night of thinking, I finally know the answer to his question. Yes. Not recklessly, not blindly, but honestly. Because the greatest mistake I could make right now wouldn't be loving you too deeply. It would be pretending you don't matter this much. Life gives us very few moments when we encounter someone who genuinely changes our emotional gravity. Someone who makes us question the comfortable path. Someone who makes us brave enough to imagine something bigger than the life we planned. You became that person for me. And if there's one thing I've learned from building impossible things, it's that the future doesn't belong to the people who choose safety. It belongs to the ones who choose possibility. So tonight, I chose possibility. And if your heart is moving even slightly in my direction, if you feel even a small piece of the connection that has been growing in me, then maybe this story that started quietly between us is actually the beginning of something much larger than either of us expected. Because sometimes the most important decisions in life don't happen in boardrooms. They happen in quiet houses late at night when someone finally stops running from the truth in their own heart. And tonight, that's exactly what I did.